Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to just welcome you all to this afternoon's session. I hope you've enjoyed this morning and you've got a lot from the sessions that you've been involved in. My name is Gemma Dixon. I am a senior student and I'm a volunteer for today as well. I am here to introduce our next speaker, who we've got this afternoon. We've got the brilliant Kevin Uphill, who is going to do a session on exit strategies and VALUAT, which I think for me as a student, it's something I'm not quite up to speed on, so I think I'm definitely going to benefit from this. Kevin's got a variety of skills. He's an entrepreneur, an investor, an advisor, and he's also a published author. So I'm sure we can all reach into some of those skills. As an advisor, Kevin has mainly worked with mergers and acquisitions, and he's helped to buy and sell over 300 companies. Kevin's biography for today actually described him as being highly energetic and enthusiastic, so I think we're all in for a really fun session. We will do a Q&A session at the end, but I think we're also going to be taking a few questions and a bit of engagement throughout, so if you've got any questions I'll be running around with the mic. So I hope you all enjoy, and without further ado, I'll hand over to Kevin. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Yes, so I genuinely did write some notes on the back of the envelope, but I've got a good slide here as well to go through. I didn't get a chance to turn up to the imposter syndrome gig that went on earlier. I would like to hear how that went, but I didn't think I'd fit before I went into it, so I did it. Sorry, someone got it. Right. M&A market, we help people buy and sell companies. We're very active in what we call the emerging market. So, but it would help me if I could understand how many of you are in corporates, how many of you are in SMEs. And I know that's difficult for you guys in the virtual audience, but in the room. So, quick show of hands, who's working for corporates, who's working for SMEs? So, corporate and SMEs. So, the vast majority of SMEs. So, SMEs up to 200 people, that's the main market we focus on. Companies valued between 2 and 50 million. So, that's the market that I want to address and really share what's happening, but also some of the technicalities. Now, I'm very mindful, technicalities with a room full of chartered accountants is going to be fun. You have your own views on how the maths work. So, I'm not going to go absolutely into the detail of the formula because we really haven't got time for that. But really, one bit of the backdrop is we are incredibly busy in doing deals. There's an awful lot of deals happening, and the reason for that, fundamentally, is organic growth is incredibly slow. So 20 years ago, we were in the West looking at growth at 3-4% a year. Now, we're lucky if we're going to get 1.5% a year. When you get that, what it does is it puts pressure on margins, which forces markets to consolidate. And there's a lot of fragmented markets. So M&A is centre stage in that. Obviously, reasons for slow growth, and we're all mindful that we think we've got a recession coming up. I'm not an economist, and I was feeling very depressed about a lot of this as I was reading it the other day. But obviously, we do have a lot of debt that we've got to pay off. We've got, built off COVID and also 2008-9. We've also got an aging population, so taxes go up, that suppresses spare income, we have less money to spend, and that leads to recession. But what I was concerned about, well, I'm worried about UK PLC, and what's actually the outlook for us? Well, because the exchange rate is quite low, there's a lot of international interest in terms of M&A, and that's quite important. It means that we, on our work, have to think about how we can also find international buyers. That's highly relevant. But the other thing is, it's not as bad as all that. Our debt is still nearly half that of Italy's, and a third of Greece, and something like a quarter of Japan. So, although we go on about UK PLC being in a bad state, we're still only in the top 20 from a debt perspective against GDP. So, I don't think it's as bad as they say. If we are going to have a recession, I think it'll be a light one, and probably we're going to face that because we need to hold back inflation. But I don't think it's going to hit M&A. And fundamentally, why consolidating fragmented markets? So the drivers that we're seeing, we call it the four corners of mergers and acquisitions. Who's buying companies? Are people looking for economies of scale? Can they have cost saving? Sorry guys, do you need 2 FDs when you're putting together businesses? Sorry. Do you need 2 MDs? Do you need 2 depots? Synergy, can we cross-sell? So call it 4 corners. The other area is shareholder value. So are we securing an increase in the value of the overall by putting together two businesses? But the fourth corner, and probably most little understood, is positive disruption. And that's fundamentally when you do M&A to change the business model. Now, that's my favourite corner, it's the most exciting. I think economies of scale, it's a one-off, you shouldn't do a deal for that. Ideally, you should be looking for all four if you're interested in buying companies. Positive disruption is where Netflix failed to persuade Blockbusters to buy them for 50 million. Well, that's the biggest mistake of all time for Blockbusters, so probably the biggest M&A failure in terms of positive disruption. On the converse, probably the most successful was when Google bought Android. Again, I said 50 million. So, yeah, those are two examples of positive disruption where you buy different IP and change the market fundamentally through it. One was missed, one wasn't. One of the issues we see with positive disruption, quite often we have companies where you think that's really good, that would fit this corporate, but you can't get through what we call the status quo of the managers in persuading them to understand that disruption. And that's actually very often because entrepreneurs, when they do their presentations, when they do sell presentations, and if you're looking to sell a business or you work with us to sell one, we take that into market on an office basis. So we go in, we do these presentations, and often entrepreneurs are way too much in the dream space and they don't have enough empirical evidence to persuade policies and corporates of why it's a good acquisition. So data is a fundamental point if you're going to get into that positive disruption discussion. So valuations, what are we seeing? Well, last year they went up slightly. One of the reasons for that is that there's also a huge amount of cash looking for a home in private companies. We've got an issue. Oh, we'll deal with that another time. So valuations went up very slightly. There is literally billions looking to go into what we call the emerging market. There's more cash than there is opportunity, and that's because private equity has outperformed all other asset classes in the last 10 years. So over the last 10 years, private equity has given you a better yield than if you've been in the mainstream stock markets and or property. But of course, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Money's come back in and is looking to be invested. And they're looking to invest in growth companies, and typically they're looking for a 3x type multiple. So although we talk about doing trade deals in M&A, very often now we're facing what we call a sort of trade hybrid of trade and private equity. So it might be a trade business that's being invested in by private equity that is then doing a buy and build strategy. And we're seeing that trend materially. Valuations have eased off since 2021, mainly due to fears of recession and Ukraine. I think you can all see that it's going to be a tough market, so the valuations have eased off. But typically, in the private enterprise market, we're looking at values of between 4 and 12 multiple of the price earnings of profits. Okay, the bigger the profits, the bigger the multiple. And fundamentally, that's genuine because the more sustainable the income of that business is perceived to be. Okay? The other biggest valuation driver, we're talking about price earnings multiple profit, it is adjusted profit. So right now, if you're valuing a company, you've got to do an EBITDA type calculation. EBITDA, before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization. EBITDA, the C is a COVID adjustment. We need to remove all furloughs and look at normalisation. We did a substantial transaction last year in the online retail space to LBC, who's private equity, I think about 40 million quid, and we were looking at them in the other way. Most COVID adjustments are looking to push revenue up, but in that case, because it was online retail, actually, how much was it going to fall off? Because they had a very positive experience in the COVID arena. So EBITDA, or PBIT. So EBITDA is for service companies, PBIT probably for manufacturing companies, so price earnings before interest and tax. And then a multiple between 4 and 12. Most up to 5 million are actually between 4 and 8. The more recurring the revenue, the higher the multiple. Which is why SaaS companies, for example, go at very high multiples, or a lettings agent might go at a multiple 7. Whereas an estate agent, you might only be 3 or 4 because you can't forecast how many houses are going to sell next, and he's very dependent on the team. So by far the biggest influencer on multiple is the recurring revenue nature of the business. But also, when we talk about multiples, we talk about multiples of adjusted profit, you need to adjust the owner's profits. And sometimes that's an add-on or an add-back. It depends on how they run their business historically. In terms of multiple influences, as I say, recurring revenue is by far the biggest multiple. IP does have an impact, but we'd like to see it turning into profit so we can assess the value of it. By far, the other area that is relevant is also whether there's any barriers to entry into market. So if you've got a business that is the same as the guys down the road, i.e. there's 15 of you, and it's really quite easy to see how you might compete, that would be a low multiple because it's quite also ran and high risk. Whereas if you've got a business that's unique and creates what we call we need motivation buyers with barriers to entry, either IP or a particular team or particular customer base, a niche that you can own, then that would be a more valuable business. So you go on that profit, a multiple might be 5 or 6 for that sector, and then you go, how defendable is it, what are the risks involved, you either discount or enhance multiple according to that analysis. But fundamentally, the market will decide the value. So most projects in the market we're looking at, 2 to 50 million, you go out on an office basis, you're looking to get 3 or 4 offers, and therefore the competitive environment will drive the bids, and that will also materially impact on the value. This point is one really for those of you who are sitting on boards in companies. Who here is in the board on their businesses and sits on the board? Okay. So my top tip, and we have a division that helps do strategy for companies, is look at the time you spend in your board on management and governance versus strategy. So management and governance are, is the operations running well? Who's good at what job? Where are the real team issues? In the end, strategy, what multiple influences are you able to put into your business? Have you considered how you look at changing the multiple? What new products, strategic alliances, or acquisitions do you need to carry out to enhance the value of the business? And I find that very often when you actually drill down with leaders, the amount of time they actually spend on strategy and understanding how they can place their business model ahead of the marketplace rather than chasing it is very slim, because they don't know the difference in how they divide strategy and management time. So as a CFO, that's something you can walk back to your leadership team with and go, look, actually, if we want to create more valuable companies, we've got to think about where we spend our time in terms of strategy versus management. And this is this diagram shows that the low value stuff, bottom, structure, management, it should be delegated, it should work, and wherever possible automated. The high value stuff is at the top, in the why and the vision, and what new products, strategic alliances or acquisitions or multiple influences can you apply to that business will then design a more valuable business. And for me, that's also asking, what are your future customers going to want? Now, one trend that we've seen recently in the market is exit options have changed. So, I'm a little bit older now. Look, I've been doing this nearly 30 years. In fact, one of my friends is an investment banker. He made a point, never more than 25. You just changed LinkedIn, so you never do it more than 25. So I thought it was good advice. So, but when we first did this, it was trade deals all down the line. And trade, you find a buyer, you're looking for those kind of stuff. Over 50% of our transactions the first year last year were trade private equity. So more private equity than trade deals. So private equity has become really important for M&A. But there are also a new area which I do want to talk about because it's not understood, which is employee ownership trusts. Who in the room has heard of employee ownership trusts? Employee ownership trusts. So sale to the employees for an employee ownership trust. Okay, so it's a little understood area. Okay, so we're going to cover that because it's important. So if you're a CFO, you're acting for your shareholders, they're considering exit, or you're looking at how you build more valuable companies, you need to also decide which is the right exit route. Is it a trade deal? Well, the press says it is because they're normally the ones that get really high multiples. But actually, that's not right for every company, and quite a few don't have the differentials to drive that. So what else can you do? The history was, well, you look at management buyouts, but increasingly people don't want to put their houses on the line or personally guarantee the debt for those management buyouts. But the other issue with them is that they restrict value because, of course, managers don't generally have the depth of pocket to do the deal, and funders are not particularly aggressive on leverage management buyout deals. So the bank funding is quite restricted for them. So employee trust is a new area, and we're going to do 6 of these this year, I think, on current forecast. So it's a really important trend. So that's very nearly 40% of our deals from a standing start 2 years ago. So it's really important to understand. So they're better than MBOs because, for the sellers, because most MBOs are structured over 3 to 4 years, whereas employee ownership trust is structured over 6 or 7 years, so you get a higher valuation. The other reason they're better than MBOs is an MBO, if you're a seller, you'll pay tax of 10% the first year and 20% thereafter, based on your business asset taken relief. There is no capital gains tax if you do employee ownership trust. So they are the new MBO, if you like. But how do you value them? What's the structure? What do they do? Skip on. So what we do, we set up a new company. That's going to buy the old company in as a trust by way of trustee, and we're going to use the future cash flow over the next 6 or 7 years to pay for the business. That's the funding behind it. But one of the other benefits to it over an MBO is that when we're using that future cash flow, because you can do it over longer, it's boosting the value. But also, the sellers don't need to stop. With an MBO, it's like, well, we bought the business, off you go, Mr. Shareholder, we don't want any more to do with you. With an employee ownership trust, so long as you've got a change of control, which is more than 51% of the sale, you can continue to stay employed, you can continue to stay MD if you want. Now, spiritually, that's not right long term, because you've sold the business to the employees, and otherwise all you've done is create a very tax-effective exit. What you actually want to do is also figure out your succession within the equation. So you do need to be creating a tag team with the senior management as you go. But the fundamentals of this is by setting that up, where businesses aren't necessarily valued at a high multiple, you can still get a deal which benefits all the employees, and all the employees can get up to $3,600 a year tax-free benefit. So one of the other reasons why this is really exciting, I call it purposeful capitalism, what it does is it increases retention in the team. So if you've got owner managers, they're looking at exit, you know it's not high multiple, you're aware that, a management buyout is probably not really on the table because, and therefore, employee ownership trust could be the area to look at. If you are interested in that, there's loads more on my website, webinars, and me talking about the subject, so you can get to understand it a bit more. Fundamentals of why there's 0% tax. Governments want them in the UK, all the main parties want them because they deal with the social mobility issue, but also we have a massive productivity issue. We earn less per head of employee in the UK than other economies, and employee-owned businesses are more productive because they have more retention. But my vision of where we're really good at employee ownership trust is because we're doing all the numbers, we do all the legal, we control the whole lot, but there is a fourth corner, which is the strategy. And the strategy behind it is you get alignment with the senior management by pushing them into the upper quartile of pay for the duration of payments. So that needs to be modelled. Plus, by loading in a bonus for the employees to start with, that needs to be modelled. If the sellers are paid out, typically 6, 7 years later, then that business will reinvest more because you haven't got owners putting out dividends in some ways historically. Hence, good for UK PLC's economy. So, creating succession and getting rid of an issue where the business may not survive because it can't do a trade deal. Okay, has anybody bought companies in the room? Again, I'm mindful online is that you can't raise hand, but who's been involved in an acquisition? So, okay, good. Did you buy one? Did you go well? It went well. Good, okay, all right. So, but many don't. So how do you do it and how do you drive acquisitions? Well, if you are thinking about acquisitions, the first tip really is to know yourself before you buy others. But the second is to make sure that you create choice. So way too often the people come and say, look, we want to acquire, we know we're in a fragmented marketplace, but we're pretty open about what we want to buy. And we take exception to that, mainly because what it means is that you end up trying to talk to too many people and you don't do it well. Whereas the acquirers that win, although they look for choice, they're very strategic about it, and they approach fewer people, and then they stay in touch with them. Because a no not now doesn't mean a no tomorrow. People's circumstances change, yeah, whether it's come back from holiday, I just can't do this anymore, or ill health. So very often a no today is in less than 2 years' time. So if you're trying to talk to 400 people, you're never going to track that. So what you need to do is look at your own business model, try and identify how you are going to place that ahead of the market rather than chasing it, and then model fewer people to go and talk to, contact them and stay in touch. And then you're far more likely to get your acquisition in order. You do need to think about how you're going to fund it. And there is good bank debt available for funding still. Typically, we're using more and more challenger banks than we are high street banks. Good friends with people like Shawbrooks or FinCats. They're lending anywhere between 2 and 2.5 times EBITDA on a cash flow loan. Minimum profits really, where they're interested, is sort of 500-600k plus cash flow a year. EBITDA, they will lend. But if you can't do it from reserves, you can't do it from borrowing, the other way you can fund a deal is, of course, deal structure, and that is by paying some on earn-out or some on deferred payment. And typically, in the EME market, emerging mid-enterprises, 2 to 50 million value that we're operating in, you would expect to have to pay, say, 60 to 70% on completion. The other 30% might be earn-out or deferred. Now, earn-out is more valuable to you as a buyer because you don't have to pay it for the achieve, but obviously it's more risky to the seller. So when we're into these negotiations, we're balancing risk and return for both buyer and seller, and it is very much an opposite driver there. Buyers want high earn-outs, sellers, if they're going to have to take a deferred structure, will look for more fixed payments. So perhaps a low note subject to them staying to de-risk, but not related to the performance of the business. If you are doing earn-outs on performance, try and keep it simple. If you do it on profit, that causes you a problem with merging companies because you can't then do it. Because the sellers will automatically actually as well, until we've achieved our earn-out, we want to be ring-fenced. We want to hold it harmless because we can't control it. We get more cost again. So actually, gross profit earn-outs are probably more intelligent if you're a trade buyer and you're going to try and merge it in. But of course, cash is king. I mentioned earlier about international buyers. We've got a £7 million deal at the moment, some global American buyers, a big corporate, and it's all cash because they've got it. And because it's a contracted recurring revenue, they're very chilled about it. And it's a multiple about 8 because it's contracted recurring revenue. So, of course, cash is key on deal structure. What ultimately you're trying to do for your sellers, do you remember the multiple table that I showed earlier on the scale of the profits going up? The bigger the profits, the bigger the multiple. That's because of the stronger mindset in terms of the cash flow, the more forecastable the cash flow. So what you're trying to do, when I talk about the 4 corners and I talk about shareholder value, what ultimately you're trying to do is put 2 businesses together on a lower multiple and then create multiple arbitrage by pushing up the scale to a higher multiple. So simplistically, you buy 2 companies with a multiple of 6, bolt them together, get some economies of scale, and you exit at a multiple of 8. And ultimately, that's the fundamentals of private equity. That is what they are trying to do all the time at the moment. And the vast majority of the private equity deals we're doing are buy and build strategies because organic growth is so slow. In terms of due diligence, I think you probably most of you know the science of due diligence. We are doing everything through data rooms. We do suggest, and if you've got something that you're thinking of selling or even looking to buy, you might give them this hint if they're not quite ready, but do join one data rooms. We actually have a product called Vendor Assist where we will do an audit before going to market, a good year and a half before, to bench test its capability in terms of surviving due diligence. Due diligence, great news for you, finance team, but obviously finance is centre stage. You do need to be able to produce accounts pretty much in real time these days, and increasingly, when I talk about price earnings multiples of profits being a valuation driver, is debt-free cash flow subject to normalised working capital is the other adjustment that is done to that valuation. So if you can't demonstrate what your working capital requirements are, we can't sell the business. So we really need monthly debit and credit analysis to understand how that cost of capital, working capital is being caught up in the business before we can identify what multiple needs to be put on. So shareholder value driving check. If they can't produce real-time management accounts, you probably can't sell the business. And that's fundamentally because if you think about the old method of valuing businesses, what's the last 3 years' historic profits? Well, I mean, the last 3 years are just disaster, isn't it? Volatile. Can't use it. So actually, what's it doing today and what's it likely to do tomorrow is far more relevant in terms of the multiplier. Far more relevant. But to demonstrate that, we've got to have real-time management accounts. And for me, therefore, the other area that's growing, it was growing before COVID, instead of growing subsequent COVID, is what platform is your business sitting on? And again, as CFOs, that's a real area you can work on, because all businesses today are tech companies, but how good a tech companies are they? And how transparent does that create in terms of the business model? So it's a key area of due diligence is technology, and that's growing. And I know that makes sense, because if the technology is behind, it's quite hard to push that business model forward. So it is a value driver. The private equity we talked about, I'll just give you a sort of final example. Now I'm going to try and move us towards some more questions, if that's okay. And do want some questions also from people online, if that's possible. I enjoy the questions more than I do the talk, because I think sometimes we get more knowledge out of that, if that's all right. So private equity, where is it used? Well, I've discussed they are buying companies in order generally to consolidate markets and do buy and build strategies. But more and more now, what we're seeing is, because sellers are increasingly ambivalent about the sale of their business, and that's because, well, okay, so I told my business I've got 5 million, now what do I do? Okay, that is a problem. You know, I'm another guy down the golf course, that's great. Now what? Okay, and actually, a lot of sellers get grief when they're selling their company because they're so used to being busy and productive. There's that shock of what do you do post-sale. Okay, and it sounds great, Portugal, golf course, but the day after you sell the business, you're not important anymore. You're not getting any emails, and no one's phoning up and asking you what to do. That's quite hard work. So a lot of sellers are ambivalent for that reason. But another reason that they're ambivalent is, well, you've got your 5 million, I'm picking that number, nice number. I think Coops worked it out, by the way, that today to be a millionaire, you need to have about 5 million. In and out, driveway, little boat, and possibly a holiday home, and enough money to live on from the investment yields. So it's about 5 million, but it depends where. Fundamentally, the principle behind it is where do I put that money to get an investment yield? And markets are quite shaky at the moment, so people are very nervous about giving it to investment advisors, and property's got a lot harder. So the old-fashioned idea again was you sold your business and you did some buy-to-let, etc. But if you go for more than 3, it starts to get a lot harder from a tax point of view in terms of property. So tax has come breathing down on that, which has made it harder for sellers to get a yield, so they're less focused on selling their business because their business is quite good cash flow. Private equity steps in that scenario because, of course, what you can do is you can do a partial sale. And we call it a growth capital transaction, but this is an example of one. And it's not their numbers, but We did one last year. A company called Tire Fix went to Literacy Capital, who is the vehicle set up by Paul Pinder, who is the ex-CEO of Capital, so knows things about buying companies. But this was theirs were a typical elevated deal or growth capital transaction, as we call them. But the fundamentals of this, you've got deal number one, EBITDA on a price earnings of 6, 15 million enterprise value. We take 10 million completion, a little bit of an earn out, and then we roll over to 3 million. So we bought into the business, we kept a stake. Private equity add another 5 million, so for them the total value is 20 million. So the mortgage, if you like, on the business is getting 20 million. So any future stake has got to clear that 20 million. Okay? But then we've got 5 million more cash to do some acquisitions. We go out, consolidate the market. It's a fragmented market. We go look for acquisitions. Bit of organic growth because we're focused on it. And also, one of the mistakes private equity don't share, one of the benefits of private equity, is the sellers are de-risked. So for them, they can go for organic growth. Whereas if it's their own business, likely they cap out and it starts to potentially become a lifestyle business. So this breaks that glass ceiling. So they will more likely get some organic growth because they can attract better talent, but also they've got slightly deeper war chest to go after it, plus the risks aren't the same in terms of going after it. Also doing acquisition, can we get the EBITDA to 7, price earnings multiple of 10, sell out for 70 million in 5 years' time, take the 20 million off, we've got 50 million back, and therefore the 3 million that we've rolled over is worth 7.5 million. So we've gone on a journey, we've sold our business, but we've doubled the money of our retained stake, more or less. And within that, you don't have to be the MD. Very often in this journey, the sellers agree that they're not the right CEO going forward and move to a chairman type role because they can't work for private equity. I famously asked one of my friends who's a private equity guy to explain private equity to my clients, and he said, "What, without a spreadsheet?" And I think that just about sums it up. Suits and spreadsheets. So many entrepreneur owners just can't work in that environment. It's not the way they work. They work on an intuitive basis. Well, you know this. You wrestle with this all day long. Often there's a tag team when you do private equity transactions. Okay, I'm nearly finished, so please store up some questions if that's all right. But just to remind you of the deal process, if you're thinking about buying and selling, this is done on a sale basis, but you can equally reverse it. But we're big into preparing the company for sale, so viability stage and preparation. If you are going to market, it's really important to be able to present in real time your numbers and show the model and show where the value is. So you do that for a data room and you audit that so it's due diligence ready. And the old days was you produced an information memorandum, it's 30 pages long, trying to describe it all, put the model. Don't do that, do it for a marketing data room. Keep the iron nice and short, that appeals to the MD. The other stuff appeals to you guys, the FD. We need the empirical data to back it up. So do it for a marketing data room rather than for an information memorandum, and prepare the company to sell where possible. And in that preparation, we're looking for what are the pitfalls that might knock it over. In terms of going to market, private equity trade, global trade, it is America, Europe, Nordics, it's not China at the moment. India are looking, or starting to look again, I should say. They paused in COVID. So international is important. Go out and approach them. We do that. If you were working with us, we do it on a multi-channel basis. It's not good enough these days just to write to somebody. You've got to write, you've got to email, you've possibly got to LinkedIn. It needs to be multi-channel. It's not good enough to do it once either. You need people that are busy. They have many defence mechanisms to avoid you. You've got to break those barriers down and get in front of the right decision makers. So it's not only multi-channel, but it's multiple reach outs. So we actually do posted stuff, but we're approaching CEOs, we do it on 2 or 3 times email. And we change the message each time. It's really weird that the second email gets answered far more often than the first. We don't understand quite why, but the whole, did you get my last email, makes people panic. Very strange. Getting in front of them, NDA, phase the release of the information, create a market in terms of meeting. And most of the meetings these days, because you've got a marketing data room, you can do online initially. So the old days, it's great news for us, the old days where we used to have to sit in 2-3 hour long, what we call viewing meetings with potential buyers, all that's gone. And now down to an hour, do like each other initially on Zoom or Teams, which is great, and then we can have the face-to-face if the dynamics are good. So the point of that is that's really important, because that saves your sellers time, and also as buyers it saves you time. So we're not chasing our tail on smart meetings, but by having marketing data, you're also creating a position where people can offer from anywhere in the world. We've got to that point in some of our projects where we've had team meetings, etc. Nobody's ever met, and they've offered, and we're not even sure we've met even before conclusion. We have genuinely recovered that has come. Multiple bids on an offers basis. It's not just price, it's also ability to complete, deal structure, earn-out versus deferred, but also how are they looking at things like your debt-free cash flow model, which we need to analyse, and also your working capital requirements. So you can't do it just on price. The other reason you can't do it just on price is it's cultural as well. Do they have the same vision for our business as we do, and how do we fit? So the vast majority of money on due diligence is spent on commercial, financial, and legal, but the remainder is deals tend to fall over on people, and nobody spends any money on cultural due diligence. So again, there's a top tip there in terms of M&A. If you're going to buy companies, how do you get access to the people, and how do you look at the culture? And by the way, these days everyone's open net, right? So that doesn't mean you've got the same culture. You know, are they more democratic than you? Are they more autocratic? Are they more values driven? What is their decision making process? How team driven are they, or leader driven? All of that is part of the cultural nature when you're assessing due diligence. Typically, a deal process for us is 6 to 9 months. With the completion process, once you agree the deal and offer, you go into exclusivity and then what's called heads of terms. That is a morally binding document which should outline all the commercial key points, and then typically it's another 3 to 4 months to go through to the completion cycle on that deal. So M&A is really busy. There's an awful lot going on at the moment. Positive disruption, probably the biggest driver that is understood, changing your business model through acquisitions. I wrote a book, as was pointed out earlier, called Creating Competitive Advantage in Dynamic Markets in 2016. I put in it boundless Flux, boundless opportunity. Now, that was written in 2016. I really regret that. Okay, I really regret that statement because boundless Flux post-COVID, oh my God, it's been really tough and it's really volatile. But the statement still stands. Where there's change, there's opportunity. So how do we design our business models, and how do we bring M&A into the boardroom? It's not understood enough. How do we bring it into the boardroom so we can create competitive advantage through it? Whether that's buying, selling, taking in private equity, or other models. So we're obviously passionate about the subject. We don't think it's understood enough. We don't think boards spend enough time bringing that expertise in. But fundamentally, business models change every 10 years today. If you started a business 50 years ago, probably 30 years later, it would have looked more or less the same. A business we start today, in 10 years' time, is going to look dramatically different. M&A, therefore, is a key way to change business models. But people don't bring it into the room enough because it's seen as a bit high risk and also highly technical. But there are people to help. And on the note of help, a bit of a promo for Avondale here, but we have, it isn't actually just for Avondale, we've got a knowledge bank on our website. There are over 50 articles, 12 podcasts, 15 webinars, so that's me talking, apologies, but if you're joining me, like I said, that I'm still talking about that, you can go and listen. And it is all what we call CPD for business owners and leaders and accountants, where they're not quite familiar with all of these concepts. Okay, so and that's building every couple of months we put more stuff out. Recent one on shareholders disputes was quite fun. So please do look at that if you want to hear more on what we've been talking about today. and we've got some upcoming webinars. But that's me over. Just to address the remote audience, have we got any questions for the remote team? And we're also looking in the room.
No, we've got no questions from online, but I think you probably will have something in the room, hopefully.
We should ask who's got the first question.
Well, I've got a question if nobody else has.
Go on.
If that's okay. I want to know, is there any particular business category that's more scalable than others?
Yeah, tech. Yeah, I mean, we launched and managed service businesses, for example, we get over 100 non-disclosure agreements per business. That's because it's all contracted for recurring revenue, but also, and therefore it's quite sticky, but also increasingly because of cyber, they've all got line extensions. So if you're a good IT company, loads of operations you can go with it. You can create a SaaS model, can go into columns. There's other parallels that you can get at the customer from. So tech is by far the easiest to go. So,
Manual Humphreys, Chatsworth Products. Do you see some purchases where the acquirer will buy a minority holding an option to buy the company in 2 or 3 years' time?
Yeah, I think that's growing. I think we did that with Aquafil last year, actually, which was fisheries business doing IP and intellectual property on how you maximise organic farming. I didn't do the deal on my colleagues did. We've got 6 new advisors that got all signed, but I think that was 40%. I think if it's well set up and it's got good corporate governance and it's over $1 million profit, then that's doable. When you start going below that, it's probably too small for it. But yeah, I think that's a favourite of international buyers as well, because they're hedging, they've got plenty of money, they're not sure whether they want to do it. So that is quite a lot of Indian companies, for example, enjoy that formula. We're not overly excited because, of course, the minute you get into less than 25.9% of the shares, you've got the whole change of control. Unfortunately, if they're buying 40%, they can veto future sales, they can veto special resolutions. So the shareholders' agreement becomes really fundamental. But that's not that dissimilar to the work we do with private equity. Shareholders' agreement is always critical in those negotiations as well. And I think it's possibly an underutilised instrument. If you remember earlier, I said leadership, strategic alliances, new products and acquisitions. When invested at 40% stake, it's probably taking the strategic alliance that next step further. So it sits somewhere between the acquisition and strategic alliance. Does that help? Any more questions, please? More. Another one, okay?
Another question. Employee ownership trusts.
Yes.
I actually work for an ESOP company. That's the American version.
Yes.
Is it similar here? Because with that one, everybody, it's a bit like John Lewis. When everybody comes in, they end up becoming the owner.
Yeah, fundamentally, it's exactly the same. ESOPs and EOTs are similar, although EOTs, the English version, some of the legal structures and the articles, etc. are different. But the concept that all employees are treated equally. So when you come to the bonus, if there is an employee bonus, the trust vote the bonus. So it has to be in the interest of the beneficiaries, but all the owners are co-owners and they're all treated equally. And when the trust votes the bonus, it's either paid on length of service, hours worked, and remuneration, or a point system of 3. I'm quite keen on hours worked because my view of the EOTs is that the real key to making them work, you've got to push the management into the upper quartile for the sector, okay? Because otherwise they're not incentivized to hit the loan notes. And I'm not looking at employee ownership trusts, and I know in the US they're more commercial. But in the UK, there's a bit of a feel that this is about cooperative businesses, and we're saying, sorry, this is a capitalist system. This is not about consensus-driven businesses. We want to hear from the employees. We want them to be better paid. We want them to have their up to 3,600 a year tax-free bonus. But centre stage is management, and how we're going to keep the business model fully commercial or ahead of the market, right? And to do that, we need to push their salaries. So I like ours proposed, but actually the strategy side is how do you increase the reward for the senior team, because they're really the ones where the pressure's going to hit, particularly during the longer period. When you've done it, you've got an employee voice, you've got management centre stage, you've got the trust over here. So you have three kind of governance areas that you need to be thinking about. The trust is think school government, they're not operational in the business. They're there as a check and control, A, to make sure no notes are paid for the ex-sellers, because that makes the whole structure work, but B, is the business being run for the benefit of the employees. Okay? They shouldn't be getting involved in operations, which is why we think management is central for those transactions. It's a really exciting opportunity. There's 700 of them, maybe John Lewis, that's the oldest, but Argument Communications, Wallace and Gromit have just done it, Richard Sounds have done it. This is really good purposeful capitalism. Many sellers just aren't even aware of it. But when you add up the 0% tax, you add up the increased period over MBOs, they can get full commercial value, help their team, and be richer, whilst hopefully, if we get it right, we get the strategy bit right, alignment between the team and the payments in the future, we'll end up with more purposeful businesses that invest more in the future as well. So, you know, we're trying to do our bit for the economy around that. More questions?
Have we got any questions yet?
Working for entrepreneurs as opposed to finance and small business, entrepreneurs often freewheeling, innovative, like change, aren't always good at structuring a clear exit plan. How do you encourage them to crystallise that so you can get everybody to buy into that journey?
Well, you do need to meet people like us 2 or 3 years beforehand, so you understand how much more complex it is. But let's be honest, the words that we're missing in entrepreneurs is they're not always great listeners. I'm one as well, so I know that. I can't even hear myself, you know, it's a problem. I think in the end, do you remember I said that you've got to be really clear when you've got a board meeting or a management meeting? And, you know, SME board meetings might be once a quarter, you know, away days, maybe 2 days. It's those days where you've got to get them aware that shareholder value is a science. It's not an instinct. You know, this optimism that, oh, well, we'll keep piling on more customers and more profit and, you know, more turnover rather than profit and all of that. It needs to be designed. And the entrepreneurs that get top money for their businesses time after time again, they were all telling you that there's been some design in that, or they were very lucky in case the business model had a real cash flow, you know, in the marketplace. But the ones that I'll repeat, it's design. And the fundamentals are showing them the model of a difference between leadership and management. So many entrepreneurs understand the concept of working on the business, not in it. And you know, the point of that is if you're doing the day job, you're working in it, you're working on it, you're designing a business model. But for them, too often, that means, oh, well, I'm just delegating and I'm not tracking it. So it is about, in the end, Bill Gates' quote, isn't it? Be nice to geeks for one day they'll rule the world. You need to show them that empirical side of the business. Hard. Does that help?
Yes, and I think also partly my question was about where they don't want to tie down their future, so they don't want to map out their exit.
They don't want to map it out, yeah. And that really. So I was with a private bank the other day. The question they had is, when is enough enough? You know, again, that's one of the issues you will have is shareholder alignment as well. So you tend to have, if you've got 2 or 3 shareholders, one wants to sell, the other doesn't. But the fundamentals are there's never enough time and dialogue spent on it. So it sort of goes back to some of my theories on shareholder disputes. People rush off to the lawyers because they can't get seen eye to eye, but they've not actually spent 5 days not in a room doing nothing but going, we are going to figure this out. And I think with exit options, it's the same. Look, you're getting older, you know, the business needs more investment, you're holding the team back, you're already well off enough, How do we look at that equation? And you've got to try and create a picture of their net worth versus their time worth versus future value. So we can do some of it. I also do some work around what I call gap analysis. So, okay, the business is worth that today. The aspiration is that. Well, let's look at what the business model would look like at that aspiration, and we'll work the business plan downwards rather than upwards. That way, instead of looking at incremental growth, you get radical shifts. Okay, well, you want it to be worth 10 million. That's what it needs to be look like to be worth 10. Now this is what you need to do to achieve it. Actually, I don't want to wait that long, and that looks like it's going to take too much money. 6 will do on that. And that's the sort of work you need to do. How that helps. One more question.
You mentioned it's best not to base an earnout on profits. Typically, how would you see that? What would that be based on?
Yeah, well, I mentioned that private equity will do it on EBITDA or profit because they've got a ring-fenced business. But I mentioned that you're trying to merge it because obviously if you're merging it, you want to go after cost savings. So how do you model that? So typically you would do it all gross profit. So what you might do, again, if you've got £10 million deal, you might say we'll pay you 6.5 on day one, we'll do 500k on a deferred subject to stay. But the other 3 million is an earnout, and we'll do it over the next 2 years. And for every pound of gross profit you make, I can do maths on this, it's got a 3 million gross profit, this business. So we've got a 2-year earnout, we'll pay you 50p on the pound on that gross profit that you achieve over the next 2 years. Okay? And then they'll get that 3 million. But actually, if you go slightly more sophisticated than that, what you might say, well, do you know what? 3 million gross profit, business doesn't make any money below 2.6, and it makes a lot more at 3.3, so we'll do it on a hurdle above those bounds. So it's pence on the pounds and only above X and below Y. And it's that kind of structure.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. Well, I think that's us done for today. Really appreciated the session. Thank you for your excellent questions. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, if you've got more questions, email me, look at that website and webinar for more information. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
We have finished a little bit earlier than planned, so I'm going to prompt you all to please fill in the survey on the app so we can just get a bit of feedback about how you found the session. I think it'll be really useful. We are also going to be going to a break soon before our keynote session this afternoon, so please use the session to just get a bit of refreshments and maybe get a bit of networking with some of the colleagues and the other attendees. But thank you so much for coming in today. I'm sure we all really enjoyed it. I'm definitely going to have a look at the webinars on your website. But yeah, thank you very much to everyone here in person and online, and have a nice rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
I wish I could.